Hello, this is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from beautiful Florida. And today our question comes to us from Celosia Calway. And Celosia's question brings us to a frequent topic here at the Vlog, which is the Wiccan Rede. And for those of you who are not familiar with the Wiccan Rede, it is do as you will but harm none, or various variations on that sentiment. And Celosia's question is, if one gets into a physical fight, is that breaking the Wiccan Rede? And Celosia goes on to assure us that she has not in fact been in a physical fight, she's asking theoretically. And my answer to this is that the Wiccan Rede is often wildly exaggerated in terms of how people interpret it. I've even had people tell me that they think it applies to hurting people's feelings, whereas I cannot imagine anything farther from the truth. The Wiccan Rede refers to harm, which is a very specific thing, and from a Correllian point of view must be understood in terms of the traditional meaning of that word. Things that do not traditionally come under that heading are not what the Wiccan Rede is referring to. And as an example, if someone has just murdered a family of 4, and you arrest them, you are certainly hurting their feelings. However, you'd really probably better arrest them before they murder the next family down the road. There are a lot of situations in which you have to hurt people's feelings. I know a lot of pagans whose Christian relatives would feel ever so much better if they would give up their pagan spirituality, and would tell you that their feelings are very hurt, that their son or daughter or niece or nephew or grandchild has left the religion of their birth and gone to a different one. But the Wiccan Rede is not suggesting that you must give up your spirituality because it hurts someone else's feelings. That's not what harm means. Harm never meant that, and it certainly doesn't mean it here. Now, getting back to the question of a physical conflict, if you're involved in a physical conflict, is this harm? Is this breaking the Wiccan Rede? Well, I'd have to say it's not that simple a question because it depends on a number of variables. The first variable is how did you get into the conflict? And the second is what did you do in the conflict? And the answer to these two questions really define whether or not it involves harm. I personally believe that a fair fight between equals is not harm, and that again, harm is egregious or unprovoked damage. So if you started the fight, well, yeah, you may have done harm, but if you were responding to someone's provocation, you probably did not, provided that you were responding in proportion. And I'll tell you a little story by way of an example. My grandmother Emma, not to be confused with my grandmother Mabel, was once in a situation where she was returning to her home, and she was carrying in one hand her purse and in the other her umbrella, and she was about 78 years of age at this time. And 2 young men accosted her and attempted to steal her purse, which they thought would be pretty easy from a 78-year-old lady. Well, they were wrong. My grandmother firmly held on to her purse and beat the young man about the head and shoulders with her umbrella until he let go. Then she returned to her home. Now, did she do harm by doing this? I would say absolutely not. She was merely defending herself, and no one has ever considered that to be harm. Now, the young man, in trying to steal the purse, certainly did do harm. Even though he didn't get it, the attempt to do it is still, in my opinion, doing harm. But in fighting him off, my grandmother certainly did not do harm. Now, what if instead of having an umbrella, my grandmother had had a firearm and had shot the young man trying to steal her purse? Well, that's a harder question again, because I really think the question would be whether she felt that she was in that much danger or not. And this is very important in looking at the Wiccan Rede, that it is not an easy answer to every situation. It's a matter that requires reflection, and there are many, many variables, and it certainly is not the simple-minded thing that people often pass it off as being. And again, I would say that harm is entirely a matter of traditional definition. Many things can hurt a person without harming them in the traditional sense of the term. Even medical treatment can hurt a person considerably, but would not be considered harming them. There are many different situations. One that I often like to point out, many people say you must never interfere with anyone's free will, and everything being equal, that certainly is true, but there are also occasions when you absolutely should. If your 3-year-old is about to touch the hot stove top, you certainly should interfere with their free will and prevent them from doing it. If someone's trying to steal your purse, as happened to my grandmother, then you certainly have every right to interfere with their free will to do that, because they have no right to do it. And the mere fact that it's their free will to do it There's no reason you should not interfere in that kind of free will. When we say you should not interfere in free will, we're referring to situations where, again, everything is equal, not where someone's trying to do something they should not do. So again, it is a complex situation, and people try to make it into something very simple, and it isn't. And I think that people often do themselves a great deal of, dare I say, harm by approaching these things in too simple a manner and taking them in a manner that is not reflective of the subtleties involved. So it really is rather a deep subject that requires considerable reflection to truly understand. But to go back to our original question, is being involved in a physical confrontation a violation of the Wiccan Rede? It depends on a lot of variables, but inherently it is not necessarily. So I hope that answers the question, and until next time, may you blessed be. Pray for peace. Pray for love. Pray for stability. Pray for the nation where you live. Pray for the world. The Tarot of Hecate. My 100-card tarot deck, 30 years in the making, finally available to you from witchschoolstore.com. Check out a copy today.